Okay, greetings, Akita JALT members. I'm Ben Grafstrom, the president of the Akita JALT chapter. I'm coming to you today from my office in Tegata, Akita University's beautiful Tegata campus. So for obvious reasons, our monthly JALT meetings have been canceled this first semester. And hopefully we will resume meeting once a month on the third Saturday at 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock at Yugakusha in the fall after summer vacation. In December and January, I booked speakers for the entire year. Speakers from Iwate and Aomori and here in Akita, some new faces, new colleagues who joined us in Akita this spring. I had booked, and as you can imagine, people scrambled to get their classes ready for the Enkaku Jugyo, distance learning. So unfortunately, taking time out to come talk to us at a JALT meeting was kind of not a priority at the time, which we can understand. It's been a very trying situation for all of us educators. But one taker, Jason Tacker from Akita Prefecture University, rose to the challenge and said, hey, I'd like to do a presentation using Zoom that we can record and then upload to the Akita JALT website. And I said, hey, great idea, let's do it. So Jason Tacker is joining us today. Like I said, he's an assistant professor at Akita Prefecture University. But let me tell you a little bit more about his background before he takes it away with his presentation. So Jason's undergrad degree, his bachelor's, is in cultural anthropology from St. Cloud State University. He continued on to get a master's in TESOL, also from St. Cloud State University. His master's thesis title was Cheating Behaviors in an Intensive English Course. And today's presentation is kind of an extension of that master's dissertation. Jason, his first position at a university in Japan was at Nihon University. After that, he moved on to Matsuyama University and then came to Akita University about 6 years ago. And after 5 years at Akita University, switched over to Akita Prefecture University. Jason has been a JALT member for 2 years, but I've known him longer than that, and he has attended a lot of the JALT SIG conferences and the national or international conference rather. He's attended the conferences and some JALT activities, but then 2 years ago decided to take the plunge and become a member. So we are happy that he's become a member of our chapter. And without further ado, Jason, how about you take it away?
All right. You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
All right. So I will attempt to, you might have to make me the co-host so I can share the screen real fast.
Okay.
Got it. All right. There we go. And we want this. Fairly certain. No, we want this. Never mind. We want that. Okay. All right. So everyone's seeing this, hopefully. All right. My name is Jason Tacker. I work over in the RECCS department at Akita Prefectural University. I really like it here in Akita. It's a nice place. My family really likes it here in Akita. And as Ben has said, I've always been interested in student cheating, right? So this actually does come out of my original master's thesis in student cheating, years and years and years back. It's always been one of those things about culture and cheating and how it's related to each other. Right? So I'll just get going with this. Okay. So, do you have a smartphone, right? Everybody has one, right? I don't think that there's a point. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't have one at this point, right? Smartphones make everything easy. You can check the web for your weather. You can check on whether you can. Now, I just saw the other day you can check on. You can order McDonald's through your phone now. I hadn't seen that before. Maybe you could do it before, but I mean, really you could do anything with your phone at this point, right? So it's versatile. It can be used in many, many different ways for the convenience of the people using them. But are they being used the right way, right? Smartphone unawareness, right? And this is about, if you look at the bottom here, it says Tyndall and Bolander. It's from 2012, right? And this is from 2012. That's 8 years ago, right? So keep that in mind when I'm reading through this a little bit, right? According to a survey of university attendees, and these were university attendees in the United States, right? It's just as an example, right? So 95% of students bring their phones to class every day. Yep, I would say 100% of students, at least here in Japan, bring their phones to school every day. 92% use their phones to text during class. I'd say that's pretty accurate even now. 10% admitted to texting during an exam on at least one occasion. That's interesting. Now we're getting somewhere with this, right? Admitting that you texted on a test or during a test, right? But the majority of students surveyed believe that the instructors don't know what's going on. Well, I suppose back in 2012, we weren't really that far, well, maybe almost a decade in, really, with cell phones. I remember having a cell phone in 2007, 2008, something like 2006, but they weren't that sophisticated. They weren't smartphones at that point. That's a more recent thing. And so the majority of the students surveyed believe that the teachers didn't know. It's probably because it wasn't that sophisticated back then. Now, on the other hand, we have more sophisticated smartphones, right? And so for the cheating behaviors, right, we're not talking about old phones, we're talking about newer phones, smartphones, right, for that matter. So cheating with smartphones in Japan. This is my experience, right? So I've seen students hiding phones while surveying classes. Now, I don't know how many other teachers do this. I know I do. When students are working on activities, when they're taking a test, I walk around the room and I watch. I make sure they're on task, more or less, right? I remember back at not in any recent history that I can think of, I mean, maybe they've gotten more sophisticated about how they hide them. But I remember in one specific case, I remember one guy, he would have his phone out. I could see him from a distance, he'd have his phone out. And then when I walked close by, he would not very convincingly hide it under his leg. And then the minute my back was turned, I'd go back up front and I'd turn around and I could see that he had his phone out again. So he was obviously doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing, or he wouldn't be hiding the phone. Number one, it was a test. So he was doing something, right? A little more recently, we used to give book reports to students in the Kokusai Shigen Depato at Shudai. And at one point, we found out that the students were cheating on their book reports because they were all the same. They had all read the exact same book they had all written it the exact same way. Just to find out a little bit later at a meeting that one of the students, or a handful of the students, were taking pictures of their book reports, of the smart kid, or whatever you want to call it, the offending student, was taking pictures and sending them to his friends through his phone. And then they were just copying them in and handing them in, assuming that the teachers wouldn't know this because they were in separate classes. We did find out, obviously, right? And then we get sending text answers from outside and inside classes. I've seen that. I've seen students that have said, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. And this is always during a test, right? Or, well, mostly during a test. And their phone, I've had them put their phone on the desk, at least in a couple of situations, so I can see it right there. And they pick up their phone and they immediately start walking for the bathroom. And I'm like, why do you need your phone? Put your phone down. And then like, oh, I don't have to go to the bathroom now. I'm like, I see. Probably should go to the bathroom anyway. But it's just a couple of examples, right? CopyPay, of course, I'm sure most of you have probably run into CopyPay, right? Copy and paste things. You can do that with a phone, albeit it might be a little more difficult than using a computer, but it can be managed, right? So this is my experience, and it's frequent enough. But don't take my word for it. Take famous examples of smartphone cheating in Japan. So Japanese University hopeful gets all zeros after trying to cheat in a test with a phone. Actually, this example and the next example I thought were different, but they're the same. But I know there's more than one. I've seen them in the news more often than not. So students, and this is more, maybe this one is different, but January 20th, 2020, so this is relatively recent. This is a few months back. Students are giving each other the answers from a website to their phones while they're taking entrance exams, right? And this one was a kid is getting exam answers during a test to get into Kyoto University, I think. And then they caught the guy that was giving the answers. The 19-year-old student is driving away from a police station in Sendai. They catch him in Sendai. So it's not a localized thing. They're sending answers from all across Japan to one specific place or to people that they know in other places that they've met on the internet, and then using their phones to cheat while they're in the tests. I would guess why. I guess my first question would be, I mean, if you're taking an entrance exam, why are you letting students have phones? Why don't you just take the box out and say, put your phone in the box and get it later? I don't know. But again, it's clearly a problem with students using phones to cheat if it's in the news of all things. So why are Japanese students cheating with cell phones, right? Well, obviously they don't want to fail, right? I mean, but it's very fatalistic, right? It's this idea that if I fail, I've screwed up completely. I'm like, I failed classes in university. I mean, granted, it wasn't a fun thing to do. I wasn't really happy about failing classes, only 2 or 3, but I repeated them. I got a good grade and I went on, right? But this is very fatalistic. It's like, oh my God, I can't fail. I can't fail. I can't fail. It's like, it's the life or death situation, which seems weird, but it could just be the system. So passing tests in Japanese culture is the cornerstone of being considered educated, right? But it treats education like a lock and key situation, right? You end up saying, here's the door. As long as you do what you're supposed to and jump through the hoops, you get the key to the door, open it and go on, and you consider yourself educated. I have a feeling that has a lot to do with it. But is that all there is to it? Is that all there is to it? I don't think so. I don't think it's just that it's fatalistic and that it's mainly about. It's all about, right? Context and justification, culture. The educator's cultural ideology conflicts with the student's cultural ideology. This is more important at the very end where I make a guess at what this is, but culturally. But ultimately, the idea, the basic idea is, as a foreign teacher, how I view cheating is different than how a student views cheating because of culture, right? But I have a previous experience with students from near Middle Eastern backgrounds. Culture was the key. So this is where the idea comes from. Culture with my Middle Eastern students in the intensive English courses in Minnesota, they cheated not to save themselves, but to save their group. And it was a collectivist idea. They all went there. They had money that they were getting from the government and from their governments in the Near East, the Middle East. And if they got a poor grade, they lost their scholarships. They lost the money, so they'd have to go home. So to them, it was they all go up or they all go down. It was collectivist, right? It was a group-oriented culture. And so for that explanation of why they cheated, it was because they needed to be together. They needed to stay together. And so they had all these wild examples of cheating to make sure they all stayed together in the situation. And that is it. That is the beginning of this. This is the why I find it so interesting is how does culture, how can you apply culture to the behavior of cheating, right? So context and justification, culture in Asia. So why would teachers assume that this behavior would be cheating, right? So this is just an excerpt from another article from a book, really. For many EFL students, learning not to cheat is more than a difficult task. There's a cultural hurdle. In some Asian countries, students are taught to memorize and copy well-respected authors and leaders in their societies to show intelligence and good judgment in their writing. So, I mean, you can read this yourself. You don't need me to read it, obviously, but The idea being that copying something and regurgitating it isn't cheating. It's just an idea, because the culture says, well, if you're considered a learned person, if you're a smart person, then you memorize these things and you spout them off when you need to. I'm like, but okay, that I can see how that would work, but coming from a different culture, I can say that just sounds like plagiarism in a focal way, or if you were just writing it out, I can see that as absolute just plagiarism. But culturally, they're saying in certain situations, in certain Asian situations, right, that just copy paste something as long as you get it done could be considered perfectly acceptable. Whereas coming from a Western background, it would be not considered cheating or the lazy route or not doing the work and getting the good grade for it, right? You're not putting in the work you're supposed to put in. So these are just ideas as to why, right, justifications as to why culture could be a large proponent of why students cheat. All right, so my question then is, if it is culture that justifies cheating with smartphones in Japanese EFL classes, then what aspects of culture are a driving force? So I think there are lots of different ways you can define culture, right? But one of my favorites is Hofstede and organizational culture. So I went with that. So we needed a definition of culture, right? Culture represents a set of likely reactions of citizens with a common mental programming. Reactions need not be found within the same persons, but only statistically more often in the same society, right? So it doesn't mean that everybody is always going to have the same strength of whatever that cultural trait is, right? And we'll get to those in a moment. So we'll say, like the Middle Eastern students, collectivism, group orientation, right? We'll say there are going to be some students that are, or some people in Japan that are way more strong in the culture trait of collectivism, and there will be some that are not so strong at it, or weak, or not at all. The lone wolves of the society, I suppose, would be the exact opposite. But they will all exhibit it in some way, shape, and form. And so it's measurable, all right? It can be measured because everybody shares the ideas and the behaviors because of the common mental programming. All right. So we have a definition. What do we measure? So Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory, it was a worldwide survey given to, I don't remember how many employees, hundreds if not thousands, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that. You could check it. Between 1967 and 1973. The survey tested for individualism, collectivism, right? Like America would be individualistic, right? Me, 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 I'm out for me. And collectivist, it's for the group. Uncertainty avoidance or risk avoidance, which would be having a very structured culture or a very structured society so that people avoid having to take unnecessary risks, or any risks at all for that matter. Power distance, which is how willing a culture is to accept unfairness, right? If you, in that sense, I suppose you could say, if your boss harasses you in some way, just for example, I'm not saying anybody harasses anyone, but if your boss harasses you in some way, do you fight back? Or do you just accept it and go on, more or less, right? And masculinity, femininity, which isn't meant to sound sexist. These are the terms that were used, but this is more like cultures that are geared towards, masculine cultures are geared towards competition, and feminist cultures are geared towards empathy or compassion for people. Yeah, I'm again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm not the one that came up with these terms. All right. So in order to do this, me and another teacher created a survey, and we gave the survey to 198 students from 2 universities in Akita, and it was in Akita University. So this was a couple years back when that one was done, and Kanazawa. So at the Kanazawa Institute of Technology, she no longer works there, but still has I think she still has the survey. questions were written to follow the Hofstede survey. So it's extremely hard to find the original survey. I mean, it gets kept under lock and key. And so we had found through another book, or I had found through another book, a book on leadership, some of the original questions that were, and then changed them and put them in Japanese so the students would at least understand them, hopefully in their own language, well enough to answer them with some amount of certainty, right? And so we attempted to concentrate on the dimensions that were student-related, it seemed student-related. That doesn't mean that all of them wouldn't be, and there are other ones that the original four there's more than four. There's more than four, there's like 5 or 6. As a matter of fact, you can see it at the bottom here. But we concentrated mainly on uncertainty avoidance, collectivism, masculinity, and long-term orientation, which again was something added afterward. And I'll explain it later. It's because the long-term orientation was added because it was specifically made after a researcher had realized that the original 4 didn't work for Asian cultures. Anyway, I digress. These are the questions. So these are the questions. I'll show you the questions that we had on the survey. These are the ones that worked. Not all of them worked. We had 14, 15, 16 questions, and we gave them through SurveyMonkey. But not all of them worked. But the ones that did seemed to indicate that one culture trait was more prominent than others, at least with students. All right. So the first example question was, in Japan, order and consistency are most important, even if it means there's no creativity or innovation. Uncertainty avoidance, right? This is obviously about risk avoidance, right? Because if consistency is more important than creativity or innovation, then it's about not stepping outside the lines and taking any risk. It's about always being safe. In this question, again, it's a slightly more positive. It's 111 agreed to the 87 that disagreed. It was a bit, but at least it was something that said, yeah, we get the idea. We agree with it, at least to a point. We agree with it, right? That we don't want to take any risks that aren't necessary. The next one, in Japan, social situations and instructions are understood in detail, so all people know what they are expected to do. This seemed pretty. I mean, I didn't write the Japanese. My Japanese isn't this good. The woman who helped me, she's Japanese, so I'm assuming the students understood the question just fine, or maybe it wasn't structured. It wasn't structured specific enough for them, and there wasn't enough here. But it was in the middle, and I thought, okay, well, in the middle is fine for this kind of a situation. It gives you some idea that uncertainty avoidance is playing a part in this situation, right? But we get on to the next question, where we get specific about things. Using smartphones in the classroom are essential to accomplishing classroom tasks, uncertainty avoidance. You get 171 agree to 27 disagree. Now we get to the fun stuff, because you've got way more people that believe something is supposed to be necessary, something that is there to make the room, or the classroom, the EFL classroom, risk-free. And there's very little disagreement in this one, right? So that's a pretty bold answer to that, right? And the next one, it is important to have classroom requirements and instructions spelled out in detail so that students always know what they are expected to do. Uncertainty avoidance, 169 agree to 29 disagree, right? So again, they want it to be risk-free. The previous question was, we need cell phones to absolutely get through this class, English class. Agreed, 100%. They seem to agree. I mean, more or less, when you've got such a small margin for disagreement. And then this one, it is important to have classroom requirements and instructions spelled out, 169 to 29 of the 198 responses. Yeah. They really believe that it's important to avoid risk in the EFL classroom situation. Next, this was a question on competition or empathy. Using a smartphone in the classroom will help you understand the lesson better than other classmates. I don't know if they understood this, but they seemed to. It keeps us above other people. It keeps us on track. It keeps us in competition with other people, right? It didn't seem to work as well. It's hard to say. They agreed, but they might have taken it in a different way. So using a smartphone in the classroom will help you understand the lesson better than other classmates. Yeah, there wasn't enough of this, at least, as far as questions were concerned, to actually say this was the most important culture trait. And finally, collectivism. Using a smartphone in the classroom can help you better understand your class and keep you connected to classmates. They definitely agreed on that. But again, there wasn't enough of it. As far as questions were concerned, there wasn't enough of it that they seemed to answer that would make it relevant. There was only one or two in comparison to other ones where it was easier to make those questions pop out with answers. At least even in the in-between with the first two questions where it was like, there's something here with that. Of course, keeping you connected, it's a collectivist culture. We know that. And the last one that we tried to do, unfortunately, due to my own screw-ups with SurveyMonkey, I had never tried. I tried to do a different type of question. It didn't work. So some of the questions just got completely dropped. So I would have liked to have had long-term orientation, because I think that's actually a really important part, which I'll talk about at the very end. Why? But again, I screwed it up. There was no way to fix it after. None. So the results of the 14 questions that were surveyed, the strongest of the tested dimensions was uncertainty avoidance. Yeah, it was only a few. It was only 2-3 questions, but it was still the strongest of them it was the strongest 2, 3, 4 questions that was still the strongest, the culture trait that stuck out the strongest. And so if you go to the Hofstede Cultural Dimensions website, where you can compare the information with the original or the updated surveying of world cultures in their organizational culture and their traits, you get Japan is very high in uncertainty avoidance at 92. And also very high in masculinity and very high in long-term orientation. Long-term orientation, I think, will come back if I can think of a good way to fix those questions. But yeah, we went with uncertainty avoidance, we both thought, yeah, this was a good one, so you should write on this one. But what do you do with it, right? So we've got a culture trait that could say, well, what part of culture pushes students or in what part of a culture, what culture trait gets students to cheat in classrooms, right? Well, if it's uncertainty avoidance, why use cell phones then? The idea comes from uncertainty avoidance in the technology acceptance model. Initially, I had no idea. I mean, okay, we've got a culture trait, uncertainty avoidance, a structured way to avoid risk. But how do you explain culture and its connection to cell phone use, or technology in general, but cell phone use specifically here? An idea adapted from another survey from Schreit and Karahana called The Role of Espoused National Culture Values in Technology Acceptance. And they said you can take national culture traits from organizational culture and apply it to the technology acceptance model. Now, this, if you don't know what this is, of course, I'm going to explain it. The technology acceptance model, it determines how people come to accept and continually use technology as smartphones in their lives, such as smartphones in their lives. So with the technology acceptance model, it's about more than just, here's technology, take it, use it. It's, here's technology, take it, use it. It fits under these factors or these variables. And because it fits it fits into these variables, and something is pushing you to fit into these variables, then you will continually use it and continually use it and continually use it. There's a graphic for that, so it's probably easier for that with the graphic. So we should talk about the variables here. So external variables, such as social, cultural influence, right? can probably guess where where we're going with that. Perceived usefulness. How will this help me get what I want? Perceived ease of use. How effortless is it to use this technology to get what I want? So it's a very selfish way of viewing technology use and so far. An attitude, the user's view on using or use of the technology. Again, you could probably guess where this is going. So the external factor, culture as the external factor, culture or uncertainty avoidance. Uncertainty avoidance is a powerful cultural external factor. They look to their classmates for acceptance of cheating behaviors because they all share and acknowledge uncertainty avoidance as being very high in Japanese culture. They probably do not think about it in this way, but do know it, right? So culture is the external factor that pushes students to actually go and do, to use the phone because it's a risk avoidance system, right? Because the phone can be used as a risk avoidance system. In strong uncertainty avoidance countries, there's more tolerance than fairness. For example, as uncertainty avoidance increases, individuals are more likely to believe that the ethical standards are determined by the least ethical competitor. So it would be interesting to see that, that power distance plays a role in uncertainty avoidance, because the stronger the power distance, the more uncertainty avoidance is necessary. So perceived usefulness. Will this help me in class? Most technology now has an internet connection, email, chat apps, texting, dictionary, and a camera that can be used to find information or share work in classrooms, right? It's useful. What we said at the beginning, it's useful. You can do anything practically with it. It's not just a phone anymore. It's a phone, it's a web browser, it's an alarm clock, it's a cheating device, right? It's a copy-paste machine, right? It's useful. Perceived ease of use, can I use it effortlessly? Yeah, students are permanently glued to their phones, and all the time spent using smartphones gives them great experience and knowing how easily they could use them. They're using phones on trains, they're using phones in class, they're using phones at work, they're using phones everywhere. It's easy to use. They have the experience to use it, right? So, and the final one, attitude towards using, right? Students spend a lot of time with their smartphones. Again, they're on the phone and on the train, they're at school, they're walking and not paying attention when they walk, and they're continually looking at their phones and almost getting hit by cars. They have a favorable attitude towards their phones. As a matter of fact, last year I had a bunch of students in a science English class. They did a presentation on what smartphones students choose. And they said, I was surprised, they surveyed a bunch of students, and they said, oh yeah, more students have iPhones than they do Android phones. And they said, well, why? I asked why. They said, well, when we asked them that, it's because there are more accessories for iPhone. That's it. That was their point. More accessories for iPhones. So how could you have a non-favorable attitude when you're buying accessories for your phone? And there are a lot of accessories. I've never seen a student without accessories on their phone. So here we have the useful map, right? The external variables of uncertainty avoidance, the useful multifunctions of smartphones, and plus the ease of use built up from smartphone experience, and an already favorable attitude towards smartphones equals the behavioral intent to use, or the need to moderate the risk of failure in an EFL classroom. So our external variable is uncertainty avoidance, right? And it leads to perceived usefulness. It plus the perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, and attitude towards using pushes students, not physically, not mentally, but they adapt the use of the cell phone into cheating behaviors in classrooms, and God knows what else if they want to use it. All right. Factors determining strength of uncertainty avoidance, right? So we said at the beginning, not everybody espouses the same strength of a cultural trait, right? So there are social factors that affect this, right? Low motivation, pressure to achieve, acceptance of cheating through social cues, as was mentioned a little bit like a couple slides back. All three of these things you would find in an EFL classroom, right? I don't know about everyone's classroom, but I know in a lot of places. So low motivation, perhaps low motivation, mastery motivation, and of course increases the student's risk for cheating in that course. If they're not motivated to actually do the class or learn from the class, they're going to find a way to cheat so that they can get through it, right? If it's an extrinsic goal, why would they care? If the goal is just to get through the class, why would they care if they cheat? Right? There's no point. If they're not really there to learn, then why would they care if they cheat? All right. Right? Pressure to achieve, right? You're supposed to get through university, and then once you get through university, you're supposed to get a job, put on your first black suit for a year, go to work, go to the izakaya after work with your friends, and go through the motions, right? But in order to do that, you've got to succeed, right? And to succeed through college, you've got to put up with a lot of stuff, right? So the pressure on Japanese students to achieve occupational success is considered intense. And success depends in large part on earning a college degree. Japanese are well known for their team and group orientation. If cheating is common, then socially supportive of the group, then it may be very difficult for a Japanese student to resist the temptation to cheat. All right. Oh shit. My camera's froze. Oh no. The strong influence of, which cameras froze?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but my camera's froze. Are you sure?
No. Your camera seems fine.
Okay, because my camera, it wasn't froze. It doesn't seem like it. I'm almost finished. Should I just finish it now?
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't see any problems.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Okay. All right. I thought it, because maybe my computer was messed up anyway. I'll go back to it. All right, hold on. Here we go. There we go. All right. Social cues to accept cheating behavior. The strong influence of peers' behavior may suggest that academic dishonesty not only is learned from observing the behavior of peers, but that peers' behavior provide a kind of normative support for cheating. Monkey see, monkey do, right? If I see little Hiroshi over on the other end of the class using his phone to cheat, and I'm not doing so hot in the class, then yeah, of course I'm gonna pick up my phone more than likely and start doing what Hiroshi on the other end of class is gonna do, because he's succeeding and doesn't need to worry about it. So again, the moral integrity of the class is determined by its lowest moral competitor, right? So if you've got one guy who's willing to cheat and get away with it, then you more or less will get a bunch of people that are willing to cheat to get away with it. All right. Okay. And so we come to the conclusion. The question was, if it is culture that justifies cheating with smartphones in Japanese EFL classes, then what aspects of culture are a driving force? I still believe that uncertainty avoidance is the national culture trait that drives Japanese students to cheat, with social pressures, low motivation, and social cues to fuel it. Of course, I'd given this presentation before and they said, that's it, that's your only thing. I'm like, yeah, it's just one idea. Of course, there are other ideas for why students cheat. This was just one concept, right? In a sea, I'm sure, of concepts for why students cheat. Right? This was my concept for why students cheat, all right? Schreit and Katahana have done the more academic, earlier, and much better survey but found the same thing. Uncertainty avoidance was found to have, across both studies, a consistently significant moderating effect on the relationship between subjective norms and behavioral intention to use, such that the relationship was stronger for individuals with high levels of espoused uncertainty avoidance. Now, when they were doing the survey, when they did their survey, and I'm not sure, I never saw what their actual survey looked like, just what their paper was, just the research. There were differences, obviously, right? Our group, or my group, was homogenous. It was just Japanese students. It wasn't a mixed group. They were doing it in the United States with students from all over the place. And it said it was mixed for variance. I concentrated on smartphones. Schreit and Katahana had 2 surveys, and they surveyed with PCs and PDAs, right? So that would make a difference. They had actually given out 1,000 surveys, but only got about 200 back, right? Something along the line. So that was about the same. So regardless of the fact that we might not have gotten a glowing reception with uncertainty avoidance, it still stuck out, and it stuck out well enough to make the argument. So is it cheating? Of course, right? I mean, we're not asking the question, is it cheating? But I was thinking about it at the end. Okay, I mean, you can say, oh, well, you've got a good idea here. Cultural uncertainty avoidance is a cultural trait that could potentially, in conjunction with the technology acceptance model, could be something that gets students to cheat. It could be one reasoning for it. But I mean, what's the more important concept here? That they're cheating or not cheating, right? We're just saying culture could be one reason why students are cheating in comparison to what a foreign teacher would think. So is it cheating? Of course. But is our espoused national culture trait the reason we label it cheating? So this is where long-term orientation comes into it, right? So yeah, we're saying it's cheating. We're saying it's cheating, and we're saying it's cheating because it's uncertainty avoidance. Okay, we got that. But if we understood uncertainty avoidance the way they understood it, would we still think of it as cheating? No. Or if we are we understanding it from a different culture trait, or are we using a different culture trait when going into a classroom, and we're calling it cheating because of ideas from another culture trait? So that comes from this here. You have Australia, Japan, United Kingdom, and United States. Now, all of these, right? You got long-term orientation. Japan is highest, and Australia, United Kingdom, United States are all relatively low, especially Australia is low and United States. United Kingdom is about half. But the idea is it's the exact opposite, or almost the opposite. And so perhaps because long-term orientation, and I'll explain in a second here, because long-term orientation is almost at polar opposites, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why we think of it as cheating. And so long-term orientation is a newer dimension added after the original four. It's for fostering virtues oriented towards future goals, in particular perseverance and thrift. It's low form of the scale. Short-term orientation is for fostering the past and present, and good and evil, right? So what about good and evil? So if you take a look at this, and this is where the idea comes from, traits of long-term, short-term, high long-term. Good or evil depends on circumstances, right? Low long-term, so short-term, belief in absolutes about good and evil. So we'll just say, and this would be America, as a matter of fact, or the United States, we would be short-term. We would have beliefs in absolutes about good and evil. Whereas a culture that's very high in long-term orientation, good or evil depends on circumstances. Perhaps this concept of cheating, or why we would consider it cheating, is due to long-term orientation or short-term orientation, that we believe that there's a definite good or evil in the classroom as far as getting the grade or getting the answer without doing the work. That is absolutely bad, right? Or doing the work and getting the grade is absolutely good. Whereas a long-term culture wouldn't believe that. It's just case by case. And it's about getting the job done so that you can go on to the next job. Don't know. It's an idea, and one that I intend to look into again this year, because I really enjoy doing culture studies with students and surveying them on these culture traits. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. Thank you very much. There's no real way to ask questions, I'm sure, unless you want to email me.
No applause. Yeah.
Right?
Sorry. I can applaud.
You cannot pause?
I applause. Clap.
Applause. Oh, well, sorry. I guess I'm here having a hard time hearing and seeing things on here. That's all right.
Okay, so how about, do you want to stop sharing your screen? And then
yes. I'll show you the references here real fast, the things that I've looked at while I was going through it, and then that. All right.
Great.
Stop sharing. There we go. Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
All right, so I still am recording this Zoom meeting as far as I know. So how about I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Since no one, like you said, no one's here to ask questions, and we're not really doing this live. It's asynchronous. All right, so first, as I introduced you earlier, or as I said earlier when I introduced you, you were in Kyoto University, which is in where, Yokohama?
No, that was in Mishima, Shizuoka.
Shizuoka, and then Matsuyama. So what brought you to Akita?
Wife's family is from Akita, and it was a nice place to be. And because my wife needed to be closer to her mother, and the job was nice.
Yeah. But you went to St. Cloud State though. So did you study
Right.
abroad in Akita when you were?
As a matter of fact, I did. I was at, before it was AIU, I was at MSUA. So,
so you were a student.
Yes. Well, I wasn't, I would not claim to have been a good student, but I was a student.
Okay. So that's interesting. So you actually were a product of the Akita, Minnesota,
Yes.
Cultural exchange.
Hopefully my presentation it doesn't make that sound as awful as you do, but yes. No,
it's a good thing. There's so many exchange students that come over here, and I'm sure a lot of people wonder what happens to them. Like, do they pursue?
I've met a few people that are still
language, so it's good to know that you were actually a product of the Akita, Minnesota connection. Okay, cool. So I'm not, too familiar with like sociology and like psychology,
anthropology,
methods, and
sociology,
anthropology. That's kind of where I was getting at. So it seems like this research was mixing up a lot of different research from a variety of fields.
Right.
So,
well, it ends up organizational culture is in a bunch of different things. It's in anthropology, cultural anthropology, and it's in sociology. It's used in both. I don't know if there's a huge difference between cultural anthropology study and sociology study, but as time has gone on, it seems like the line is blurred on that one. Because if you'd asked me years ago, I could probably say, oh yeah, the difference between anthropology and sociology is this, but right now I couldn't answer that. I can't see a lot in considering. I mean, anthropology writes ethnographies. I'm not sure if sociology writes ethnographies. I don't think sociology writes case studies of specific groups of people, smaller groups of people. I think sociology is maybe more large groups of people, whereas anthropology tended to be about small groups of people living in villages and whatnot way in the past. Yeah, but if there's any huge difference beyond that, I don't remember. I'll show my ignorance on this one for the time being.
And then, so you said another professor or another teacher was helping you with.
Yeah, I couldn't write the Japanese.
So who was that?
Her name was Aya. Her name is Aya Yamazaki. I just asked her, could you help me write these questions in Japanese, and then would you give the survey to your students?
So she's at Kanazawa University.
So she was at Kanazawa. She's in Kochi. She's in Kochi now. She's at the university in Kochi now, so in her hometown.
Oh, okay. So she's not a co-author. She's
no.
Okay. And then, so some of the classes that you surveyed then were not your classes.
Nope, they were her classes. I asked her. I gave her the link to the SurveyMonkey stuff, and she surveyed her. Somewhere it was about even split. It was like 90 something and 90 something or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay. And so sorry, just a lot of just some questions about just kind of like brass tacks type stuff.
Uh-huh.
So you had a bilingual survey.
Mm-hmm.
So were all the students who took the survey native English speakers or native Japanese?
They were all just Japanese students. There were no international students at all that I knew of. Okay. It was all just Japanese students.
Oh, wow.
As a matter of fact, I remember when I was doing it with the resource science students in Shudai, I hadn't even thought about it until one of the international students said, "Should I take this?" And I'm like, "No, don't bother. Don't worry about it." That's probably why it was 198 instead of 200 or 200 something, because I had told them, you don't have to do this because it's only supposed to be just Japanese students.
So if there were students in the classroom that
were not Japanese, I told them after that first time, I'd said, don't do it, because it was actually lucky because the girl saved me from making that mistake.
So why not? So why not include then? Why not include? So for example, if there's
different culture, different idea. I mean, it might have been able to sway it one way or the other. Maybe 1, 2, maybe 10 could have made a difference if there were 10 students from 10 other countries it could have, and they don't share the same ideas of those culture traits. They could have swayed it in any way, shape. I mean, could have swayed it in some way. Could have changed it.
And then, yeah, okay. So now, I guess the question is, so now so you're saying, according to your study,
Yeah.
that
Limited
study.
study.
There's a different understanding. Like, so me coming from America, I'm going to have a different understanding of what cheating means than my Japanese students, right?
Right.
Am I correct in saying that? Okay.
Right.
So what am I to do then to remedy this problem? Like, if there is cheating going on in my class, and I have no reason to think there is cheating going on in my class, so how am I supposed to bridge this miscommunication over the term cheating? Like, what am I supposed to do as an educator?
Make sure they keep their phones in their bags.
So that's it?
That's all I've ever done. Either keep the phone. You can't take the phone away. Can't take the phone away, because I've heard of teachers getting in trouble for taking the phones away. Make sure they keep the phone in the bag. Make sure they can't touch the phone during class. I mean, it's only mainly about phone. How much they rely on the phone for everything. They're not relying on the dictionary unless they go ahead, rely on the dictionary. That's pretty easy. I mean, if you see a dictionary made sentence, I mean,
so you're not expanding. So if they cheated using an index card,
they're not going to do that.
Acceptable?
They're not going to do that.
Okay.
I would doubt that they would bother. An index card would be too showy.
A piece of paper, not necessarily.
It would be too showy. Not to mention, there's a certain aspect, I thought about that too. There's a certain aspect about the fact that the phone is an anonymous object. You can go to the phone, you can go to the internet, and you can get your information. That's why people use anonymous names. You don't have to give them anything to get the information out of them. To get information, like if you were going to get test answers, if you're going to get a piece of paper and you're going to get test answers on a piece of paper, you'd have to go to someone who had taken the test, get the answers, right? And then you would somehow be indebted to them and then have to give them something back. Whereas using a phone, right, you get the answers from an anonymous person. You don't feel indebted to giving an anonymous person anything. Maybe like pachi clap on the internet or like a thumbs up like on Facebook, but you don't feel as connected to the person that you're taking the information from, and so you don't really. So you would be obligated. Like if it was me in the past, if I was saying, yeah, man, I really need to pass this test or they're going to throw me out of college, that puts the other person in a position of power to give me the answers, but then I owe them something for it too. They could say, hey, remember when I helped you get the answers on that test? Yeah, you do me a favor now, right? They can do that on the internet in the same way. I could see, you could say, oh yeah, well, you owe me something. And I'm sure through their website, they probably do
so
something.
Can I just clarify something?
Yeah.
With this distance learning, there's asynchronous learning, synchronous learning.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds to me like I don't understand if you're looking at like synchronous cheating or like asynchronous cheating. So there's one situation where a student would be in the classroom and actively searching for an answer. And then you gave examples of students like taking pictures of test examples and then reporting the examples later on. So like what examples so when we're looking at like cell phone cheating, it sounds to me like there's a lot of different like ways that it's happening.
Yeah, it is.
So again, like how can I, what's an educator to do?
If it's always, and I was only working from the aspect of the phone because I haven't actually seen them do it any other way.
So if I take cell phones, if I say put your cell phone in this envelope during the test,
right?
Well, if someone has already,
right,
taken a picture of the test and they've already seen the picture of the test, then putting the cell phone in the envelope during the test to keep it hidden isn't going to have any effect.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's true. If they had already seen it, if they had already gotten to that point, yeah.
Like
if they had tried to memorize but they've had that problem from beforehand. where students could get their hands on paper tests before and they could memorize the answers. That's not specific to just phones. The idea was just to limit phone use because students have become so, how do I put it? They're so reliant on using the phone that I don't think they could actually go to cheat with any other way at this point. They would be too afraid. Again, it's a lot of risk avoidance, a lot of risk and a lot of guilt avoidance by using the phone. It's an anonymous way of getting the information because all you see is a username on the other end and you don't really owe them anything because you don't really know who they are. If it's another person in your class, let's say, for example, if it's another person in your class and you know who it is and you get the information through the phone, you still couldn't prove it if they erase it. Oh, well, I told this person this, this, and this. Okay, where's your proof? Oh, well, it's gone.
So what kind of like activities could an educator do in class that would eliminate cell phone cheating? So for example, if I have, okay, I'm going to evaluate an English conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, you two, student A, student B, you have this conversation and I will actively evaluate your English. I mean, clearly, so that's one assessment that students, wouldn't have the chance to use their cell phone because obviously it's a discussion. So what other types of activities would you recommend to educators that would just kind of eliminate the potential for cell phone cheating?
Just about anything where they cannot be anything where they can't be within reach of the phone as long as the phone is kept away from them. I mean, I know that sounds really general, but I've done it and I've just said, literally, you'll say, you're going to write right now. Put your phone away. You can have your dictionary if you need to look something up, but you're going to write an essay. 9990, write your essay. No phone. Put your phone away. I don't want to see your phone. You get up and speak. You leave your phone on the desk. I don't want your phone in your hands. I don't want it anywhere near you.
That's hard.
It's really just about, I know it sounds really simplistic.
NCG shows have been replaced. Electric dictionaries have been replaced.
Then I give them, I've said, well, you have an option. You can get a book or you can get an electric dictionary, but you can't just use your phone. And I've given reasons why you cheat with your phones. I don't trust you when you've got a phone in your hand, period. So
at the beginning of the semester, so you've identified, I think you've identified without question that one culture's idea of cheating is going to be different than another culture's idea of cheating. So you've identified that, and you've used that in your paper, in your presentation, and you've said that, okay, I've explained to them that this is why I don't want you using your phone. This is why I don't use your phone.
Right.
So could another potential suggestion to educators be that during the introduction period of the semester, the first couple classes, that the teacher makes it clear this is the definition of cheating. Right. X, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. This is the definition of cheating.
It doesn't help.
My definition of cheating.
Oftentimes it doesn't help. I should have added that to it. I had run into that research as well. It oftentimes doesn't help because the need to moderate is so strong that they're willing to take the risk, especially if they think that they can get away with it. Yeah. There is research for that. I will find it for you if you'd like. I have it here someplace, but I know I've run into that. And I remember reading, it hadn't made a difference. Even spelling it out, they could sit there and say, well, I don't understand why you say that because in my way, in my culture, we don't do it that way.
So they would just be dismissive of the
And that dismissive sounds really negative, but it's the idea of you can get away with it based on the gray area of culture, saying, well, when I'm coming from nani or whatnot culture, we don't do it that way. And so, oops, it's my mistake. It's kind of like fumbling around in the dark until you find the light switch kind of a thing. They'll keep fumbling around as long as the teacher doesn't, I guess I'm using a really strange metaphor. They'll keep fumbling around. They'll keep trying to push the area like a kid, right? A kid will, if you have kids will try and push you to see where their boundaries are. They'll do the same thing, but they'll use culture as the example. They'll try to push the boundaries of culture with it. When they're saying, okay, well, it's my culture to do this, it's my culture, like, not so much. And I remember that from the research. The students were using culture as they were smart enough, or they were cognizant enough of the idea of what the teacher was trying to get them to do. And they were saying, but in my culture, we don't do that. And then the teacher would have to say, yes, but you're in this culture, you can't do that, right?
So where do you see this? So you started this theme with your master's thesis. Now you've continued it. You said you presented this at other conferences, and now you're talking to us today about it. So where do you see this? Where do you see your research going?
The long-term,
like what's the next step?
The long-term orientation. I would like to do more of the uncertainty avoidance, but I've done it right now, and I don't know if it really worked as well as I wanted it to. It seemed to work all right. But I think the bigger thing, or the more interesting thing now, would be going with the long-term orientation, because, like it said at the end, one of the culture traits. I mean, the culture trait of long-term orientation. If you're a very long-term orientation culture, it's case by case. You view good and bad, or good and evil, based on the situation, whereas short-term orientated cultures, there's an absolute good, there's an absolute evil. And so cheating, if you were just using cheating as a behavior, or cheating in general, where would that fit for a short-term person in a classroom? Probably this would be bad in any way, shape, and form. But with a long-term oriented culture, cheating by that definition doesn't work, because I'm just trying to get through this situation, and there's a greater good or a greater reward at the other end, and therefore I'm justified in doing it, if that makes sense. It's about the end justifying the means.
So your research would expand to include other
long-term orientation.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. Well, I think we've already taken a lot of your time up this afternoon.
No problem.
So thanks for phoning in, zooming in, as it were.
No problem. Hopefully it was entertaining.
Okay, great. Well, keep us posted, and maybe next year we can have you in person.
Okay.
And maybe open you up to questions from some other members of the chapter.
Okay.
So,
all
okay.
Right.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.